The morning mist still clung to the gnarled branches of the acacia trees, softening the harsh edges of the savanna as the sun's first rays began to paint the sky in hues of rose and gold. Dr. Aisha Kimani, a veteran wildlife biologist, savored the quiet ritual of her morning coffee on the porch of her remote research station. It was a familiar, tranquil scene, a sanctuary from the relentless demands of her work, a moment of peace before the world awoke. But this peace was not to last. A sound, deep and mournful, unlike any territorial roar she had ever heard, tore through the stillness. It wasn't an assertion of dominance or a call to the hunt. It was a pure, guttural cry of desperation, resonating with a profound, almost human anguish. Aisha's hand froze midair, the coffee cup forgotten. She instinctively reached for her binoculars, her gaze sweeping the horizon. There, emerging from the shimmering heat haze, was Zola, a magnificent lioness, her powerful frame moving with an unusual, strained gait. In her jaws, she carried a limp cub, Kito, his tiny body swaying with each heavy step. What followed defied every known behavioral pattern. Zola wasn't merely passing by, she was walking directly towards the station, her path deliberate, unyielding. She stopped just 20 yards from Aisha's porch, a distance that screamed of both caution and an unthinkable intimacy. Gently, she lowered Kito to the dusty ground. The cub lay still, barely breathing. Then, Zola's intense amber eyes, ancient and piercing, locked onto Aisha's. There was no aggression, no primal threat, only a clear, unspoken appeal, a silent plea that chilled Aisha to her core and ignited an impossible flicker of hope. Every fiber of Aisha's being screamed for her to retreat, to follow the safety protocols ingrained over decades of working with dangerous predators. This was a wild lioness, protective and lethal, yet here she stood asking for help. An overwhelming wave of compassion, raw and undeniable, crashed over her scientific training and profound fear. It was an ethical dilemma that transcended species, a choice between duty and an impossible urgent plea. Her hands trembling, Aisha fumbled for her satellite phone, her voice barely a whisper, thick with disbelief and a rising panic. "Django," she gasped. "You won't believe this. You need to come now. Bring medical supplies. They're waiting." Within the hour, Dr. Django Mwangi, Aisha's trusted colleague and a renowned veterinary expert, arrived, his face a mask of stunned awe. The sight of Zola crouched protectively beside her dying cub, so close to human habitation, silenced him. "Extraordinary," he finally breathed, his voice hushed. "In all my years, Aisha, I've never seen a lioness ask for help." As if understanding Django's assessment, Zola took 3 deliberate steps back, creating a fragile buffer of space between herself and the approaching human. It was an unprecedented gesture, an act of profound trust, or perhaps a desperate surrender. Django, moving with practiced efficiency, knelt beside Kito. The cub was barely clinging to life, its breathing shallow and ragged. Django quickly diagnosed severe pneumonia, but as he ran his hands over Kito's small, feverish body, his brow furrowed. He paused, sniffing the cub's fur. A strange, slightly metallic odor, subtle yet distinct, lingered on the matted coat. It wasn't the scent of the savanna, nor the typical musk of a lion. Under Zola's unblinking, vigilant gaze, Django administered a potent dose of antibiotics. He felt an inexplicable connection with the lioness, a shared tension as they both willed the cub to live. And then, as Django rose, something truly unthinkable happened. Zola, in an act that defied all logic and predator instinct, gently touched his shoulder with her massive head, a soft, deliberate nudge. It was an unmistakable gesture of gratitude, a profound acknowledgement that ripped through Django's scientific detachment. Aisha, her hands trembling, continued to document everything. Each click of her camera shutter echoed the shattering of her scientific worldview. The lines between instinct and intelligence, between wild and domesticated, were blurring before her very eyes. Later, as Kito began to stir, Zola lay near her recovering cub outside, her gaze fixed on the station, etching this impossible memory and a newfound recognition deep into Aisha's mind. "This is not natural," Django murmured, his voice low, as he examined the strange odor again on a swab. His eyes held a new glint, one of concern mixed with professional curiosity. Something else is at play here. Dawn broke, painting the savannah in soft, ethereal light. Zola and Kito remained near the research station, a silent vigil maintained through the night. Kito's breathing was marginally better, a faint rhythm instead of desperate gasps, yet still too shallow for true recovery. Django arrived shortly after, carrying a specialized veterinary kit, his expression a mixture of profound wonder and professional resolve. "This will change everything we thought we knew about predator behavior," he murmured, his eyes sweeping over the lioness and her cub. Aisha, watching Zola's unwavering presence, felt the immense, almost crushing weight of the lioness's trust settle upon her. This wasn't just a scientific anomaly anymore. It was a deeply personal plea. "It isn't theory to me, Django," she responded, her voice tight with emotion. "We must help him, whatever it takes." The words spoken aloud solidified her commitment, intertwining her fate with theirs. They approached cautiously, Django leading with the medical supplies. Zola, ever vigilant, raised her massive head, her ears twitching, tracking their movements. But she remained calm, her amber eyes fixed on them, granting an unspoken permission. This unprecedented acceptance allowed Django to administer a steady flow of oxygen to Kito, the small cub's chest rising and falling with renewed, albeit still fragile, strength. Aisha, her hands trembling, filmed every moment. Each click of her camera shutter captured an extraordinary, unprecedented collaboration, a bridge built across the vast chasm between species. As Kito's breathing stabilized further, a remarkable shift occurred. Zola, her eyes never leaving her cub, slowly rose and walked directly towards Aisha. She dipped her massive head, and from deep within her chest, a soft, rumbling chuff vibrated through the air, a clear, unmistakable sound of acknowledgement, of thanks that resonated deep within Aisha's bones. That night, Aisha found an unsettling yet profound discovery near her steps. A fresh, half-eaten antelope carcass lay deliberately placed, a macabre gift under the moonless sky. Her scientific mind grappled with the impossible. "This isn't territorial marking," she whispered to Django later, her voice laced with awe and trepidation. "It's intentional." The word hung heavy in the air, laden with implications of complex thought and reciprocity utterly unheard of in the wild. Django, meanwhile, continued to monitor Kito with meticulous care. He noticed details that had been obscured by the initial crisis. Strange, almost iridescent lesions on the cub's gums and a faint blue discoloration under its tiny claws. These were not typical pneumonia symptoms. They screamed of something more sinister, something external. A growing unease settled over Aisha. The strange odor Django had noted, the atypical symptoms, and now this unprecedented behavior from Zola. It all coalesced into a disturbing question. Driven by an urgent, almost intuitive need for answers, Aisha made a difficult decision. She secretly collected a water sample from a nearby stream, a discreet act carried out under the guise of routine monitoring. She also managed to take a swab from Kito's mouth, sealing it away for clandestine analysis. They had to be careful, revealing the extraordinary bond they shared with Zola and the implications of Kito's unusual illness could jeopardize everything. Zola, meanwhile, continued her vigil. She consistently appeared at dawn with Kito, maintaining a watchful yet now almost comfortable distance. Each morning, fresh prey, sometimes an antelope, sometimes only scraps from a larger kill, was carefully placed by the porch. It was a consistent, unnerving ritual of gratitude, a silent pact reinforced day after day. Aisha spent hours reviewing her footage, her gaze fixated on Zola. She noticed the lioness's deliberate, almost ritualistic gaze towards them, her eyes holding their presence as if memorizing their faces, their movements. It was more than recognition. It was a bond forged in desperation and trust. Under their care, Kito showed remarkable improvement. His breathing became regular, his eyes brightened, and he even attempted tentative, playful movements, though always under Zola's careful, watchful eye. But the dark undercurrent of mystery persisted. The initial lab results from Aisha's clandestine tests landed on her digital pad late one night, a stark white screen illuminating her concerned face. The water samples from the nearby stream revealed alarming trace levels of heavy metals. It was undeniable. This wasn't just pneumonia. Kito's illness and Zola's desperate plea were a direct consequence of human interference. On the fifth night, Aisha woke with a start, an inexplicable pull drawing her to the window. Through the moonless dark, the silhouette of Zola, powerful and still, was discernible near the porch. Beside her, Kito, a small, dark form, lay nestled. They were keeping vigil, watching the station through the long hours until dawn. Aisha felt not terror, but a profound awe, a sense of wonder as the boundary between their two worlds palpably dissolved. Her breath hitched. The trust was absolute, consuming. Dawn's first light, pale and fragile, revealed another offering. A freshly killed gazelle lay on the threshold of human space, a testament to the lioness's unwavering commitment to their unique pact. Django, arriving shortly after, saw it, his voice trembling as he observed the gift. "This is true reciprocity, Aish," he murmured, shaking his head slowly. "We're witnessing a miracle beyond science." The next morning, the sky was bruised purple with the promise of rain, heavy clouds gathering on the horizon. Zola arrived, as expected, but this time she was not alone. From the pale mist, three more lionesses emerged, their powerful forms moving with a silent, purposeful grace behind Zola. Aisha gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. She brought the pride. Django went rigid beside her, his jaw clenched. This is either the moment we die or the moment we witness history. Zola halted at the clearing's edge, her powerful presence commanding. The other lionesses fanned out, their watchful eyes scanning the station, assessing, observing. And then, from their midst, stepped Kiongozi, the massive dominant male, his mane dark and imposing, his eyes unblinking as they settled on Aisha. His silent presence pulsed with raw power, a stark reminder of their vulnerability. Aisha, acting on instinct, slowly raised her hands, palms outward, a universal gesture of peace and non-aggression. Zola responded, a deep, soft chuff rumbling in her chest, a sound of affirmation that was then answered by the pride's collective, resonant rumble. It was a chorus of acceptance, an impossible symphony. Then Kito, now visibly stronger, trotted ahead, stumbling with youthful eagerness, its small, heeled paw placing itself firmly on the first step of the porch, an undeniable declaration of its survival, its playful confidence. Zola nudged Kito gently back with her nose, then looked up at Aisha. In a measured, almost ceremonial gesture, she slowly bowed her massive head, her gaze never leaving Aisha's. And behind her, in perfect, synchronized motion, Kiongozi and the other lionesses mirrored the bow, a collective act of profound acknowledgement and trust that defied every known ethological study. Django whispered, tears glistening in his eyes. "They're including us. We've been accepted, if only for this moment." It was a moment of transcendent connection, a fragile alliance forged in a place beyond human comprehension. But this profound bond was juxtaposed against a chilling discovery. Aisha's lab tests, meticulously run in secret, confirmed her worst fears. Kito's blood samples contained alarming levels of heavy metals and even more disturbing traces of an unknown synthetic compound. The local stream water, too, was tainted with the same toxic cocktail. This wasn't merely pneumonia, it was poisoning. Aisha and Django pored over topographical maps of the region, their faces grim in the harsh glow of the computer screen. They began to identify potential contamination sources upstream, abandoned mining sites, new, unauthorized industrial clearings, suspicious waste disposal points. The initial traces hinted at a localized environmental catastrophe, but the implications were far greater. This wasn't an accident. Someone was intentionally polluting the savanna, and someone powerful would want it hidden. They were no longer just scientists. They were accidental detectives, stumbling onto a dangerous secret, and their alliance with Zola and her pride suddenly took on a new, perilous dimension. The savanna groaned under the relentless assault of heavy rains. For 2 long, anxious days, the world outside Aisha's research station dissolved into a blurry canvas of gray and green. Zola and her pride did not return, and a cold dread settled in Aisha's stomach. Had Kito relapsed? Had the storm claimed them? On the third day, as the rain finally thinned to a relentless drizzle, a desperate cry of distress pierced the sodden air. It was Zola, her call strained, mournful, and undeniably a plea. Through the still heavy mist, she emerged from the churning floodwaters, her powerful body struggling against the currents. Kito was once again limp in her jaws, smaller, frailer than before. Aisha bolted from her chair, her heart hammering against her ribs. Every protocol screamed against venturing out, but the image of Zola's desperate face, etched in her mind, overrode everything. She snatched her radio. "Django, get the kit, oxygen, fluids, hypothermia. Hurry!" Her voice was raw with urgency. They sprinted into the clearing, rain plastering their clothes to their bodies. Zola, her flanks heaving with exhaustion, reached the edge of the rising floodwaters near the porch. With a final monumental effort, she set Kito down on a small patch of higher ground, her trust in them unwavering despite the extreme danger. The cub shivered violently, its eyes glazed, barely breathing. Django worked with grim efficiency, battling the relentless downpour. He administered IV fluids, his nimble fingers surprisingly steady, and wrapped Kito in a series of thermal blankets, trying to coax warmth back into the tiny body. Aisha knelt beside him, shielding the cub as best she could. The cub's faint breaths, ragged at first, began to steady, a fragile flutter of life. Aisha looked up through the curtain of rain, her eyes meeting Zola's. In that gaze, she saw not just desperation, but absolute, profound trust, a silent understanding that transcended language. Zola took another step closer, lowering her massive head. Her rough fur brushed ever so gently against Aisha's shoulder. A silent vow, a deepened alliance forged in the heart of the storm. "Aisha," Django murmured, his voice barely audible over the drumming rain, "we're not just saving them. They're choosing us, again and again." His words echoed the impossible truth of their situation. By dawn, the floodwaters had begun to recede, leaving behind a grim testament to their origin. The entire clearing, once pristine, was now coated in a visible oily sheen, shimmering sickly under the emerging sun. A strange metallic residue clung to the grass and rocks near the station. Aisha immediately took new samples, her mind already racing with hypotheses. The lab results would undoubtedly confirm what her eyes now saw. The contamination was widespread, unequivocally linked to the flood, and far more pervasive than they had initially feared. As she traversed the receding waters, her boots sinking into the saturated earth, Aisha made another disturbing discovery. Discarded non-native chemical containers lay half buried in the mud, clearly industrial, their bright artificial colors an obscene contrast to the natural hues of the savanna. They had washed up far from any known legitimate operations. Django examining the faded symbols on one container, his face tightening with recognition. This is the logo for Biomines Africa," he stated, his voice laced with dread. "They're notorious for controversial environmental practices, accused of dumping in the Congo just last year." The implications hit Aisha like a physical blow. She now faced an agonizing decision. How could she report this without compromising the lion's safety, without exposing her own massive breaches of protocol and the existence of this impossible human-lion alliance? The Pride had entrusted them with their lives, and she would not betray that trust for the sake of bureaucratic procedure. She began compiling a meticulous, secret dossier, documenting every detail, every sample, every observation. An inevitable confrontation was looming, and she had to be ready. From a distance, Kiongozi and the rest of the Pride observed, their powerful forms barely visible against the receding mist. Their presence was a silent, protective watch, not just over the vulnerable cub, but over the two humans now inextricably entangled in their fight for survival against an unseen, insidious enemy. If you've been on the edge of your seat, you are not alone. This story isn't just about an impossible bond. It's about a looming danger that could shatter everything. Make sure you hit that like button, share this video with everyone you know, and subscribe so you don't miss the shocking conclusion to this incredible, terrifying saga. Because what happens next, well, it changes everything. Dawn broke, a soft, hopeful light after the storm. Kito slept soundly on the porch, a small, vibrant testament to their efforts. Just beyond, Zola remained a golden sentinel, her gaze fixed on the station, her presence a silent, unwavering promise. Then, from the vast expanse of the savannah, the full pride appeared, including the formidable Kiongosi, approaching in a slow, solemn procession. Zola, instead of retreating or asserting dominance, stood her ground between the approaching pride and the porch. It was a subtle yet profound shift. She was positioning herself as if framing the humans within her circle, rather than keeping them out, a bridge builder between two worlds. Kiongozi approached, his immense power undeniable, his muscles rippling under his magnificent mane. He stopped within 20 yards of the station, his amber gaze intense, yet devoid of menace, fixed solely on Aisha. Then the impossible happened. Kiongozi, the undisputed king of this territory, slowly, deliberately lowered his massive head in a profound bow. It was an act that defied every instinct, every expectation of a wild predator, a gesture of respect and acceptance from the wild's highest authority. And behind him, the rest of the pride followed suit, a slow, rippling wave of acknowledgement and profound respect for the humans who had dared to help. Django's voice cracked with awe, tears glistening in his eyes. They're honoring the trust, Aisha. Zola must have told them somehow, she told them. Aisha felt the immense, almost unbearable weight of this bond. It was no longer just a mother's desperate plea, it was a connection recognized by an entire pride, an alliance forged in something far deeper than mere survival. The depth of this alliance, however, only amplified the urgency of their secret mission. Aisha had spent hours meticulously examining a discarded drone part, discovered earlier with the chemical containers. Hidden within its memory, she found encrypted files, a digital breadcrumb trail leading to illegal waste disposal routes and corrupted permits. The files confirmed their fears. Biomines Africa was indeed responsible for the contamination, actively covering up their criminal activities, manipulating data, and securing fraudulent permits to operate in environmentally sensitive zones. The danger was escalating. The company was clearly willing to resort to extreme measures to protect its profits. Aisha faced an agonizing decision: report her findings through official channels and risk a slow, bureaucratic process that might expose the pride and the unique bond they shared, or act swiftly, anonymously, to get the truth out. The Savannah's survival, and by extension, the pride's, depended on immediate action. She decided on the latter, choosing to leak the anonymous data to an international environmental watchdog, knowing it put her at immense personal risk but was necessary. With a deep breath, her finger hovering over the send button, Aisha transmitted the encrypted data. The digital package, a damning testament to corporate greed, flew silently across the globe, triggering a chain of events that would inevitably lead to exposure and confrontation. It was a line drawn in the sand, a declaration of war against a ruthless enemy. Almost immediately, the company, alerted to the leak through their own sophisticated networks, began to react. Local informants whispered of increased activity, of vehicles moving under the cover of darkness. Soon, reports reached Aisha and Django, armed security personnel, not just local guards but heavily equipped mercenaries, were being dispatched to the area, creating an imminent, palpable threat. The lions, their senses far keener than any human, seemed to perceive the shift. Their presence near the station, once merely watchful, subtly changed. Now they were overtly protective, their gazes scanning the horizon with a new intensity, their roars carrying a deeper warning. Aisha and Django prepared for the inevitable fallout, the immense weight of their world-changing decision pressing heavily upon them. Knowing their fight for the savannah was just beginning. The final dawn painted the savannah in a bruised palette of violet and rose. Kito, its breathing strong and even, slept peacefully on the porch, a picture of renewed life. Just beyond, a golden sentinel, Zola, watched from the clearing, her gaze unwavering, her presence a silent promise. And then, the full pride, led by the formidable Kiongozi, began their slow, solemn procession toward the station, a ritualistic farewell. Django's voice, thick with emotion, cut through the quiet. It's time to give him back. Aisha's heart clenched, a painful knot of both sorrow and profound understanding. She knew it was the right choice. the only choice. Unwrapping Kito from its soft blanket, she lifted the small cub gently, carrying its warm, familiar weight to the porch edge where wood met the dusty earth. Just as she prepared to lower Kito, a sudden, jarring rustle in the distant bushes pierced the solemn quiet. A glint of cold metal caught the rising sun. Armed corporate security. They had come. Zola let out a low, guttural growl, a sound that vibrated with primal warning. She stepped forward, protectively, her eyes fixed not on Aisha, but on the distant, encroaching human threat. Aisha hesitated for a heartbeat, her gaze flicking between the approaching menace and Zola's unwavering stance. Then, with the pride's silent, powerful backing, she gently lowered Kito to the ground. The cub, with a small, unsteady leap, padded forward to Zola, who swept her beloved Kito into the safe hollow of her chest with a deep, vibrating chuff of relief and reunion. It was a sound of absolute, unconditional love, a moment of profound joy amidst the escalating danger. Kiongozi stepped forward, his massive frame radiating raw power. He let out a powerful, ground-shaking roar, a sound that ripped through the savannah, not of aggression towards Aisha, but a resonant warning echoing across the vast plains, directed squarely at the encroaching human intruders. The pride of a formidable, bristling defensive line moved in unison, their eyes blazing with untamed fire, intimidating the security detail into a tense, uncertain standoff. Then Zola and Kiongozi turned back to Aisha, bowing their heads in unison, a final profound covenant. Aisha, tears streaming down her face, understood. They were acknowledging her sacrifice, solidifying their unbreakable bond, a promise exchanged across the species barrier. The corporate security, deterred by the formidable pride's united front and the unexpected arrival of an international news crew, alerted by Aisha's anonymous leak, retreated temporarily, their mission stalled by the overwhelming threat of exposure. The pride slowly melted back into the tall grass, Kito safe within their ranks, leaving deep paw prints circling the station, a powerful, visible mark of their unbreakable alliance. Aisha, with Django by her side, now faced the inevitable, dangerous fallout with the company. But she was no longer alone. Armed with irrefutable evidence and an unforgettable primal alliance that defied scientific understanding, she carried the world-changing responsibility of protecting the savannah, knowing this was not just about one company, but a wider, insidious network of environmental exploitation she was now destined to expose. The fight had only just begun. End. Words, 7:55, conclusion. The story began on an ordinary dawn, the morning mist clinging to acacia trees like ghostly fingers, the air cool and heavy with dew. It was supposed to be a familiar tranquility, the hum of cicadas, the cry of a fish eagle in the distance. But that peace was shattered by a sound unlike any other, a deep, mournful plea signaling the arrival of Zola, a lioness who defied every known instinct, bringing her dying cub, Kito, to a human's door. It was an impossible act, a silent request for help that shattered Dr. Aisha Kimani's scientific understanding and ignited a profound, dangerous compassion. This unprecedented trust led Aisha and Dr. Django Mwangi down a perilous path. Kito's mysterious illness unveiled a chilling corporate conspiracy, a ruthless contamination silently poisoning the savannah. The impossible bond with the pride, culminating in their protective vigil and solemn vows, transformed a scientific observation into a sacred alliance. Aisha, armed with irrefutable evidence and the courage of her newfound allies, was forced to confront the powerful forces behind the ecological devastation. The wild had reached out, and in answering, Aisha stepped into a battle far greater than she could have imagined, forever bound by the roar of a lioness and the silent plea for truth. End. Words, 198.